House needs painting, grass needs mowing, where's he at?
Hi, this is Hank. Sorry I missed your call. Leave me your name and your number and I'll get back to you.
He's gone fishing.
Hello and welcome to Hank Parker Off the Water. No,
Off the Water with Hank Parker.
We're going to get that right one of these days. Welcome to Off the Water with Hank Parker and my beautiful co-host, my granddaughter, Sarah Beth.
Well, hello.
Hello, Sarah Beth.
Hello, Sarah Beth.
Well, we're having a good day today, and we're glad you're with us. I'm cold and she's hot, so it's a little cool day here in the South Carolina area. So I'm good and warm now with my coat on, and I know you're good and cool with no coat on.
No sleeves.
No sleeves.
No
That's
sleeves.
pretty good. So, all right. Well, today's show is going to be one of those question and answer shows. So Sarah Beth's got a list of questions. People have been so kind to write in and ask questions, and we've tried to answer them. And we've done this once before, so we'll try it again. And if it works out, great. If it don't, we probably won't do it anymore. So
Right.
we'll see how it goes. So Sarah Beth, I'll allow you to do any commentary that you'd like to do and ask any questions you'd like to ask.
All right. That sounds great. I'm just waiting for these questions to load.
I've write them down on a yellow legal pad. They don't have to
know.
load when you do it like that.
All right. There we go. All right. We had one person comment. Ron Shattuck said, Hank, do you remember hunting with Jim Roberts in Canada? He passed away a few years ago. He said he enjoyed being with you.
How about that? You know, it's that was up at Harley No's place in Saskatchewan. And it's sad when you lose your buddies and friends. We only hunted that one time together, but great guy, and I do remember. And sorry to hear about him passing. That's a sad deal, but I remember well. We had a good hunt.
That's awesome. All right. Chris Sampson said, when is the PawPaw going to be available?
The PawPaw is a bait that I've been working on now for the better part of a year, and I think we're going to have them on May 1st. I think they'll be available May 1st. I had to think about that a little bit, but I think we'll have them ready to start selling on May the 1st.
That's exciting.
Yeah, that is.
I know it's been a long time in the making, trying to get it ready.
It's taken forever. We had to re-engineer it. We made some changes, and then I had to get all these custom colors painted, and then we had to get that coordinated because all the custom colors were hand painted. So to duplicate those, I'm kind of a perfectionist. I wanted them the exact, and so it's hard to take a hand custom painting and do a mass production and get every color right. But we finally did, but it's taken a lot longer. So PawPaw should have been here a month or two ago, but at least I feel sure when PawPaw gets here, it's going to be right.
Awesome. All right, next question. Hank, is it true that Billy Henderson is the best fisherman you've ever fished with?
Is that from Billy Henderson?
No. Oh, yep, it sure is.
I thought so. You rascal, you. Billy Henderson and I fished together. He wore me out. We fished in a phosphate pit over at Bienville Plantation, and that rascal would make these 500-yard casts, and so he wore me out. But I got him back last year, but I was much more kind to him than he was to me. I gave him, I was catching one of every cast on a PawPaw, so I gave him a PawPaw. He never did cut me any slack, man. He made those long casts all day long, and he probably caught 3 to my 1. But I will tell you this in all seriousness. Billy Henderson is one awesome fisherman. He is the man. He fishes a lot. He's well-versed, saltwater, freshwater, any species. I would not want to have to fish against Billy on a regular basis because I'm going to tell you, he's going to win the majority of the time. So I wouldn't say he's the very best, but I don't know of any better.
All right. Stephen Andrews asked, are the PawPaws close to the old school Milos?
Close to the old school?
Milos.
I'm not familiar with Milos. But the PawPaw is, first of all, let me tell you, a lot of people know and have heard this story, And some people have probably never heard this story, and they don't know what we're talking about when I say PawPaw. My grandkids call me PawPaw. And I went over to Lake Monticello, and fish spawn there late. And so they're still spawning, and you can sight fish in early May. And Alec, my grandson, and I decided we're going to go to Lake Monticello, and I'm really thinking we're going to have a sight fishing opportunity. So I don't take a whole lot of stuff, and I had just bought the rights to this bait that I now call PawPaw. But at that time, it wasn't called PawPaw. But I just stuck one in my pocket. There were about 8 or 9 laying on the counter, and so I stuck one in my pocket. And so we start fishing. Well, sight fishing is not really going well, so I thought, well, I'm going to try this bait. I'd fished with it before, but it'd been a while back since I'd fished with it. So I tied it on, and about the second cast I made, I caught one about 4 pounds. So Alex said, let me have one of those, PawPaw. I said, buddy, that's the only one I got. He said, PawPaw. I said, I'm telling you the truth, it's the only one I got. PawPaw, I'm telling you. So about 5 casts later, I caught another one, and he said, PawPaw. Every time I catch a fish, it was PawPaw. And so I thought, that's a perfect name. That'll be my PawPaw bait. So that's how the name came about. PawPaw is a floating bait, is a slow sinking bait, and a fast sinking bait. The floating bait, you fish it much like a suspend and jerk bait. It's real erratic. You can get it down there and stop it, and it'll just stop and suspend almost perfect. And then you can make it work and stop it again. And so you can actually fish this bait like a suspend and jerk bait. It works good on forward-facing sonar. You can see it really, really good. So it's a very versatile bait. The slow sinking bait also works much the same as the floating bait. It just go a little bit deeper, but it too suspends, and you can fish it like a suspend and jerk bait. The fast sinking bait, you can fish it in much deeper water. I fish it a lot of times in the summertime on the ledges, 15, 18, 20 foot deep, because it'll sink about a foot a second. You just count it down, and then you can fish it much more like a traditional type lipless crankbait.
I say the best way to find out, come May 1st, order it at hpbaits.com.
hpbaits.com, and get you some PawPaws.
There you go. All right, next question. Aaron Perkerson said, what advice do you have for young Christian men trying to navigate life in today's world?
Well, now that we can get into some philosophies there. I would say this for young Christian men, old Christian men, middle-aged Christian men, anybody that knows Christ, the Bible is an instructional book for life. And the more you read, the more you hide His word in your heart, the easier it is to follow and navigate. The more you know about Jesus, the more you love Him. The more you know about Him, the easier it is to obey and trust. And when you trust and follow, that faith is what helps you navigate life more than anything else. Have confidence that God is in control, and have confidence that no matter how crazy this world is, He still has that control. I like the saying, has it ever occurred to you that nothing has ever occurred to God? He knows it all. And none of this, our world is upside down. It's crazy. It's a very difficult time to be a young man. It's a very tough time to be a young person. People say, well, I was young once. Well, I was. But I was not young once in this day and time. This day and time is loud. There is so many distractions. There's cell phones. There's all sorts of distractions. There's very little quiet time. So if I was giving anybody advice on how to navigate life, I would say slow down. Have a quiet time. In the morning before you start your day, have some quiet time. Read the Bible and just pray and enjoy being quiet and sorting things out. It's hard in a noisy world to find your way. God says He lights the path. All we have to do is follow that path. Slow down, listen, read the word, and follow that light.
Awesome. I think that was pretty well said.
Well, it works, I promise you.
Next question. Roger Kendrick said, in the springtime in the South, when the lake level is approaching full pull, what is your favorite bait to start with?
You know, there's a lot of variables, even with that, when the lakes are rising and the water temperature is warming up. And here we're coming up, you know, I like to talk about April. It's just an awesome month. So here we're approaching the best time of the year to fish for me, spring of the year. It's getting a little late in the spring, perhaps, but that water temperature starts to warm if it's got color. And, you know, most lakes, and all of our lakes in my area, they run from north to south. So I like to go north, closer to the river, because it gets more influx of that muddier water coming from the rivers. So I like muddy water in the springtime. And when I can find high, muddy water, I love to fish a spinnerbait. It's just a hard bait to beat. You can cover a lot of water with it. You can fish all kinds of different structure. So if it's my first choice, now there are a lot of variables in that, you know. It may not always be the bait of choice, but that's my starting point. People ask me quite often a question similar to that: what do you do in the spring of the year? And it's almost like a broken record with me, and I don't mean to be so redundant, but it is everything on catching fish in the spring of the year. In the spring, when the water starts to warm up on the surface, the top of the water is actually warmer than the bottom of the water. Let's just say 8 feet deep. It's 8 feet deep.
Right.
The top 2 feet of water is going to be warmer than the other 6 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And so because the sun warms that water up. And I'll tell you something else. The east side of the lake, I concentrate more early spring on the east side of the lake, because the sun sets in the west, so it gets that afternoon sun, which is more intense, shining on the east side of the lake. So a lot of times the east side will be 1 or 2 degree water temperature warmer than the west side. And that makes a big difference. 1 or 2 degrees of water temp will make a big difference. You know, you and I were fishing a week or two ago, and we went one day, and then we waited a couple of days and went again. Mm-hmm. And the fish were really aggressive when the water temperature was 62 and 63.
Yeah.
So we go back, and the water temperature is falling down to 58 and 59. They're not aggressive at all.
Right.
But that afternoon, when the water warmed up and we got back up into the 60s, the fish got more and more aggressive.
Right. I was going to say the cold makes them a little bit more dormant, don't
Lethargic.
they? Yeah, lethargic.
Yeah, and it does. So the trick to catching fish in the spring of the year is, and the spring of the year may be different in Florida than it is Maine or Iowa or wherever in the northern part of the world, New York. Spring is different. So you can't just say spring of the year and let it apply nationwide, but when that water temperature begins to warm and that surface temperature is warmer than the water underneath, the water column is a big deal. And choosing a bait that stays in that top 2 foot of water can be the biggest decision you can make on how to catch those fish. So I try to use a bait. And the great thing about a spinnerbait is you can fish it deep, shallow, or in between. You can fish it 1 foot deep, 6 inches deep, 2 foot deep, 3 foot deep, 5 foot deep, 10 feet deep. So you got an option on how you retrieve the bait, on what water column you're covering, and that's in the spring of the year. It varies. You know, you start out 9 o'clock in the morning, the fish may be 4 foot deep, but as that surface temperature warms up by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they may be 6 inches deep. So you just change your retrieve and hold your rod a little different. You can fish that 6-inch water column with that spinnerbait. So that's always my bait of choice.
Wow. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. I mean, there's so much science that goes into it that you don't even think about, you know?
You know, it does. It becomes second nature after a while. But that's one thing that a lot of guys on over the years have told me about television. You take for granted everybody knows all this stuff, and you've been doing this for 50 years, and you know it's second nature to you, but you don't explain it well enough that we understand it. So that is that's where you got to keep me straight on some of these questions. Don't take for granted everybody knows, and don't bore people to death by repeating everything, but make sure that they understand exactly what you're trying to communicate to help them figure out how to catch fish.
Right. Education is key, everybody.
No doubt.
All right, next question. David Baker asks, have you ever stood on a beaver dam and fished for bass and caught a 7-pounder?
I can say, David, I've never done that before.
You never stood on a beaver dam?
I have stood on a beaver dam, but I've never caught a 7-pound bass while standing on a beaver dam.
How'd that work out for you?
Well, standing on a beaver dam it can be okay if the water is low, but if you got high water, it could be a little spongy, and you could cave in and be down there with the beavers.
Oh, wow. All right, that's all for our questions, but I think we still have some time. So,
we got lots of time. We're just getting started.
Say, little birdie told me that you once won $50,000 playing golf.
Wow.
When did you play golf? That's news to me.
I did. I honestly won. Well, that's not the whole story. It's a lot more to it. Years ago, Woody Blackburn with Ironwood Productions put on a deal at Disney World where PGA golfers would go there and they'd have the Buick Open. And the day after the Buick Open, we would have the Bass and Golf. And ESPN would televise it. And so the first year I got Bobby Watkins as a partner, and I never golfed in my life. I had never hit a golf ball. I might have putt-putted, but I had never really been to a driving range. I never really. So we line up on the tee box, and all these people are used to watching these pros, and they line up, and Bobby said, no, that ain't gonna work. Y'all got to get behind these guys. I sliced one off. I'd have killed half the gallery had he not had the wisdom to move it back. But make a long story short, that was the first Bass and Golf. I had Bobby Watkins, who is a great friend of mine, and we finished second in the Bass and Golf event. But where I won was I had Andy Bean for a partner. Now, Andy Bean, he was an incredible golfer. Still, I could think maybe he still plays on the seniors tour. I haven't seen his name in a while, but Andy's a great outdoorsman, awesome fisherman. So now I got paired up with Andy Bean. So what we would do is we would get so many points for getting our golf score. For a par, you got points. For a bogey, you got points. And you did get a lot of points if you got a birdie, but we didn't get many of the birdies. We're shooting for par, 1 over, 2 over, 3 over. And Andy and I, they modified the rules as time went on. So all the fishermen did was putt, because we were going to kill people by hitting drivers and irons, and it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe for the golfers to be on the golf course with us. We were wild. Wow. And so they modified the rules, that all the pro fishermen did was putt. So the PGA golfer would hit the ball on the green, and then it would be up to the fisherman to putt it in. Well, it was the day after the Buick Open. So the final round, the PGA always puts the cup, the hole, the cup placement in a difficult position. I mean, it's easy to 3-putt. Sometimes the PGA pros 3-putt. So you can imagine a bunch of goofball fishermen that never golf. I mean, we could 8-putt. I mean, it's just disastrous. So Andy and I were standing on the tee, and I told Andy, I said, miss the green. He said, do what? I said, miss the green. He said, why? I said, because if you put it on the green, then it's up to me to putt. And if you miss the green, you're so good at chipping, you can chip that thing up there within an inch or two of the cup, and I can just 1-putt in, and we'll dominate this event. Trust me. He said, you got a good idea, Mark. You got a good idea. So he would deliberately miss the green. I know we were playing golf with Curtis Strange and Curtis and Shaw Grigsby. And when Andy missed the first green, Curtis looked at him like, God, that was a terrible shot. And then he chipped it up there within about 2 inches, and I just 1-putted. So we had a par.
So what I'm hearing is you're the mastermind
Yeah,
behind. You're the
right,
strategist,
right.
and Andy carried.
Yeah, well, by the time Curtis and Shaw saw what was going on, we were about 10 strokes ahead of them, so it didn't matter. They started doing the same thing, but it was too late. So I ended up winning, and I didn't really win 50 grand. I got half of that. Andy got the other half. We won 50 grand as a team, but I did it playing golf.
Still, 25 grand a person just for playing a golf game. That's pretty good.
We were at Disney World, and they gave us all these little gold Mickey Mouse ears so our kids could go and they could do anything for free.
Wow.
And they go to the front of the line with those little gold ears. So, man, that was a big deal, man.
That's awesome.
We did that for about 10 years, I think.
Wow.
That was cool. I won twice.
Twice.
Yeah, I won twice. Andy was my partner 3 different times, and I think we won it twice. We had bass and race also. So that was a big deal. And then we had the Finns game at Disney. So we had a lot going on. It was all ESPN televised. It was fun times.
That's awesome.
Yeah, good.
Tell me about, you said the Bassin Drive? Or race, Bassin race?
Bassin race and Bassin golf. And I had Richard Childers as a partner once. Richard caught a 6-pounder with me. And had Sterling Marlin for a partner. I'll tell you the difference between the PGA golfers and NASCAR drivers. The PGA golfers, we were allowed to catch 2 fish each. And then once they had their 2 and I had my 2, we could cull. We could cull out of the 4 fish, but they had to catch their 2 before you could cull. So I'm fishing with Bobby Watkins, and I catch my 3rd fish, and I just throw it back because he had not caught his 2 yet. And so he said, whoa, what are you doing? I said, no, we're not allowed to cull any fish until you catch your 2. That's the rules. He said, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize. Yes, definitely, yeah, okay. So then he caught his 2, we could start culling. Well, 2 days later, I'm fishing the Bassin race with Sterling Marlin. And I told Sterling, I said, he said, well, don't throw that fish back, put him on my side. I said, no, you got to catch your 2. He said, there ain't nobody watching. So in racing, you're not cheating unless you get caught,
Yeah.
So the PGA guys, man, they are all about following the rules. But the NASCAR guys, man, they're a little bit shady on that.
There ain't nobody looking.
There ain't nobody watching.
So speaking of NASCAR, tell me a little bit about your time there. I'm sure we can make a whole other episode about NASCAR and talking about, everything that went on there. But tell me like some of your fondest memories.
Oh, well, we got involved. I got involved after starting go-kart racing. I got Hank Jr. and Billy go-kart for Christmas one year, and that started it. And then, of course, I hung out a lot with Dale Earnhardt. He and I hunted together, and so Dale Jr. now was racing street stock cars, and so we came down here to my farm to hunt, and Dale Sr. felt like Hank Jr. needed to own one of Dale Jr.'s street stock cars, and that's how that all came about. So we got kind of adapted and adopted and forced in, or whatever you want to say happened. But somehow I ended up starting a NASCAR deal with my kids.
Wow.
Well, then Darrell Waltrip, he had Western Auto for a sponsor, and so they decided to scale back a little bit. And Darrell had an all-pro team, an ASA team, and a Busch Grand National team, and a Cup team. So Darrell decided he was only going to keep his Cup team. He was going to sell his ASAs, All-Pro, and his Busch Grand National team. Well, I bought that team from Darrell. And I had Neil Bonnet was going to race for us, and then Neil ends up in a tragic accident at Daytona and gets killed, so he never gets to drive our car. So we set that year out. And then we picked up the next year, and I got Neil's son, David, to drive, who was a great guy and a great driver. And David drove a couple years, and then Hank Jr. got in. And so we rolled on, and that was the story in the beginning, and that's how we got involved. And then finally we got out, and I'm like the guy in the AA meeting that stands up and testifies. I have now been NASCAR free for 12 years.
NASCAR free.
Absolutely. Hallelujah. I'm NASCAR free. You cannot burn money as fast as you can spend it in NASCAR.
I can imagine that. I feel like you need one of those like sobriety chips. NASCAR free for 12 years.
NASCAR free is a big deal.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. I got to have more questions. We're just getting rolling here.
I guess, I mean, I'm just kind of going off the cuff now. I want you guys to DM us on our Instagram and our Facebook page any questions that you have for me or my PawPaw. Could be anything. I mean, anything in the world, so we can keep making these episodes for you guys.
Well, I had a question, and I'll bring this question up. My grandson Boone fished his first tournament a couple of weeks ago, and I practiced with him, and I deliberately did not try to make all the decisions. I tried to include him in the decision-making process about, what do you think, Boone? Well, let's try this. Well, let's try that. And I didn't say, okay, we're going to go do this. Okay, we're going to go do that. We're going to do this. I always tried to include him. What do you think about trying this? You think we ought to go over there? You think we ought to go here? The wind's blowing in that pocket. Do you think we probably ought to go in there where that wind's blowing? Maybe that'll help us. So I tried to include him on that. And as you start to mentor kids of all ages, whether it's high school or grade school, college, or a young person that hasn't fished very much, or an older person that hadn't fished very much, and you're going to mentor them and try to help them become a productive fisherman. Ricky Clun once said the biggest injustice you can do to a young tournament fisherman is put them on fish. Tell them where to go and how to fish. Let them figure it out. Give them enough information to have a starting point, but let them figure it out. And I thought that was well said, and I think that's pretty much true. So when I was with Boone, he's really good. He fishes in clear mountain lakes, and he fishes offshore a lot, and he's really good at that. But he hasn't had enough experience on different bodies of water, different times of year, like this was early spring. He hadn't had enough experience to know when to change, when to abandon your pattern, when to try this, what the next move is. So I tell people that fishing techniques and methods are a lot like ABC. You start out, you evaluate the water, you make your decision based on what you know and your experiences about the water temperature, whether you got cloud cover, whether you got a high pressure, whether you got muddy water or clear water. You take all that and you evaluate that, and you think, okay, here's my A plan. Well, if A plan doesn't work, then you move to B plan. If B plan doesn't work, you go to C, D, E, F, G, and go all the way down the alphabet. The more you know, the more you learn, the more ability you have to adapt, and the higher the odds are you're going to hit on as you move down through the alphabet to C, D, E. You're going to find something that works. And so the one thing about Boone, he's really good at 3 or 4 techniques, but beyond that, he hasn't had the experience, and he don't know that. And I tell people there are 3 kind of people in the world. There's people that know, there's people that don't know, and then there's people that don't know they don't know. That's the dangerous ones. Oh, you got to watch out for the ones that don't know they don't know. So I tell Boone, always be aware that you don't know that. You shouldn't know that. You hadn't had time to learn that. So as you mentor people who are not experienced, you can't expect yourself as a fisherman, as a beginner, to know everything. It takes practical experience. You know, I worked with a bait company for 40 years, and now all of a sudden I'm no longer working with them. So I signed on with 2 new companies this year, Arc and X-Zone. So, and they've got all these different baits. It's quite a variety of crankbaits that Arc has. They've got some cool jigs. They've got buzz baits. They've got some killer baits, and to look at them, but look sometimes can be deceiving. So you really don't know. A fishing lure is kind of like Kool-Aid. You don't know much about it until you add water. I've got X-Zone and I've got Arc. And so it's uncharted territory for me. So I've got to learn what these tools do, what these lures do, how they perform. And so it's been a challenge, but it's been very, very exciting and refreshing for me. And I've learned there was so much I didn't know. Arc's got some just awesome crankbaits. And I mean, they got a square bill that will come through anything. It's the most productive square bill, and I caught a lot of fish on it here just recently. Well, X-Zone, when I started looking at their baits, I thought, man, I really like these. They had some shapes and sizes that I've caught so many fish on in the past, and they got a bait they call muscleback crawl. And I looked at that bait, and I thought, man, that's a great-looking bait. And I could tell just by feeling the textures, the legs were going to move really good. But what I didn't see and what I didn't know, once I put that thing in the water, the claws float. Well, those claws float up, and it looks so much like a natural crawfish, and it don't take much of a bump to really get a lot of action in that bait. And I thought, man, that's the coolest thing in the world. Well, then they got this little worm called a deception worm. Well, there's a worm in California made that I used a couple of years ago. A buddy of mine used when I fished with him, and he caught the fire out of him. Well, this worm looks a lot like that California worm, but it floats. The tail floats.
Okay. So just different like innovation on something old.
It is such a big deal that all those floating pieces make those baits come alive. So I've just been tickled to death with both Arc and X-Zone, and I've got all these different baits, and I hadn't even scratched the surface on understanding all. They've got so many different baits, and X-Zone's big sellers are finesse baits. You know, they're a Canadian company, so they're up there on Lake Ontario and Lake Erie and right there around Niagara Falls. And they got clear water baits that are so effective on smallmouth. They got incredible drop shot baits. So, but they've got some killer baits for down south. And I'm going to tell you, I'm learning as I go, but I'm very pleased and it's exciting. And that's what you need to do with all your baits. I tell people all the time, fishing lures are nothing but tools. When you got a job to do, you want to choose the right tool. If you're taking a 5/8 inch bolt loose, a 3/4 inch wrench is not going to do you any good. It won't fit that bolt. So you got to have the right tool to do the right job. Now that may not be a great illustration because there's some variables, but if the fish are in 25 foot of water and you're throwing a top water bait, obviously that's not going to get it.
Right.
If the fish are up in the hydrilla and you pick out a deep diving crankbait, that's not going to get it. So you got to, and that's extreme illustrations, but you've got to get the right matchup. Well, the more you know about your bait, the more you understand that bait, the more you realize where that bait fits in your toolbox. How to fish a certain piece of structure. So as I mentor Boone and other kids and other novice fishermen, it's important to build a foundation on them discerning how to read the water, for them to understand how their baits perform, to know how to choose the right bait to do the job that they're trying to do.
Right. I will say, I mean, that is so true. It's going to take a lot of experience and getting out there and having the right people teaching them those things, because I feel like there's so much that goes into it. I've learned so much just from being on the podcast. I mean, my only experience with fishing really is the family fishing show and going out there on my own, not knowing a dang thing what I'm doing. I'm throwing my little worm in the water. That's all I'm care about doing. But I don't know. It truly is a blessing though to hear all of this and to it clicks in my mind. So I think you're doing a great job of explaining.
It's a lot of it takes a lot of experience, and there's no substitute for being on the water. people ask me, and I say it kidding all the time. They say, if there's one tip out of everything you know and everything you've learned, one tip you could give me to make me a better fisherman, what would that tip be? And it's without a doubt, get rid of your job. The job will mess you
Get
up.
rid of that job.
Yeah, you got to get on the water. You got to be on the water. There's no substitute for experience. So that's where you learn. So you got to get out there and fish. And if you don't know everything, it's because you hadn't spent enough time out there. So as you progress, you want to spend as much time as you possibly can out on the water and learn things. And then you'll know by second nature, by experience, by the past, well, this worked under these circumstances before, so I'll choose this bait and I'll go with that.
Yeah.
And then you go right on down the alphabet if it doesn't work. And so it's fun. Boone is so eaten up with fishing. He absolutely loves it. But he's got a lot to learn.
Yeah.
He's got a lot to learn.
Well, how old is he again?
He's 17.
Then, yeah.
He's
He's got all the time in the world.
210 pounds. I'm
Good
looking
Lord.
up to him.
Yeah, last time I saw him, I was like, who is that?
Yeah, he's
It's Boone.
amazing. He's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What you were saying earlier reminded me so much. The movie The Blind that came out that Phil Robertson
Oh, yeah.
put out about his story. We just
Yeah.
watched that the other night. It was
Oh,
so
did you?
good. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great
So
movie.
good.
Yeah. That just shows what God can do in a person's life. And a lot of my life and my dad parallel The Blind and how Phil was. My dad would could have played that role.
Wow.
And it's amazing what God did in his life as well as what he's done in Phil Robertson's life. So it's great to be able to have a person that's humble enough, as Phil was, to share that we all can learn from that.
I think it's powerful. And I mean, people need to hear that. They need to see that, you know, you're not perfect. That Phil, he's such a great guy. He comes off, he's a godly man. You know, I grew up watching Duck Dynasty.
Yeah.
So, you know, seeing that type of family that puts God first above everything, to see that movie and to see that that's where they came from, it was just really powerful. I mean, it made me cry.
Yeah.
Everybody was crying.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I enjoyed it myself. I don't think I cried, but I did laugh some.
Oh, no.
All right, we go back to fishing.
Right.
We'll run a few rabbits, and I think that's
We do.
good. Yeah, I think that's good. I think a rabbit needs to be chased every once in a while, so I'm pretty good at doing that. A project that I'm working on, Sarah Beth, that I'm excited about, I work with Lou's, and Lou's is a company that is a delight to work for. And I say that because they listen to you. They want feedback from the pros. They ask you your opinion about this design, about this taper on this particular fishing rod, or what do you think about a 8-to-1 gear ratio? Well, why do you want to fall back to a 3.9 gear ratio? We can build whatever you want. Explain to me why that would be beneficial, and if you're convinced that that's what we need, we'll build them. So it's cool to work with a company that is that open and that creative, and have the engineers in place that can do what you need them to do. So Mark Zona has his own signature rod series. Greg Hackney has his own series rod.
Signature rod.
Signature rod series. Andy Montgomery has his rod series, and then Kevin Van Dam. I'm going to hook up with those guys. I'm a stickler on fishing rods, so I'm working on a project where I'm gonna spend a little time with Zona and with Van Dam and Andy Montgomery and Greg Hackattack and get to go out and talk about, why do you like this particular fishing rod? There is a big misnomer on fishing rods. People think if a rod costs more, it's got to be a better rod.
Right.
And they think like women in shoes. You know, women always think if it costs more, it's got to be better.
Well, you think about, you get what you pay for.
Yeah, and that's what but that's not true.
Right.
So Lou's, their big entry back into the marketplace. Of course, Lou Childers was way ahead of his time. Lou was killed in a plane crash in the 70s. And no telling where we would have been in this world had that not happened to Lou. He was the most innovative mind in all of fishing. And where we always thought it was power on setting the hook, Lou came back and said, no, it's speed. It's speed. And if you can make a fishing rod lighter, anytime you can decrease mass, take the weight out of it, you can make it respond quicker, and you can get a better hook set. So that was his philosophy in building fishing rods. Well, then he started building the speed spool reel. And so he wanted to make a low profile, lightweight, and make the whole rod and reel much lighter than everything that was on the market. And in doing that, it made that rod and reel more sensitive. It made it more responsive. It made it quicker to set the hook. So when Lynn Reeves decided to revive the brand Lou's, he wanted to build the greatest fishing reel ever in the $100 price range.
Okay.
He felt like that's where the market was. We need to be able not to make a great reel that costs $400 and $500 and $600, where a lot of the companies were. We need to be able to make a great reel as good as those guys with those $400 reels. We need to make one for $100. So that was their goal, and they achieved that. And so Lou's made reels that blew away the competition in the number of ball bearings, in the smoothness, in the drag, everything about that reel, and they just beat the pants off of them price-wise. I mean, they had some reels that outperformed other brands that cost 3 times what their reels cost. But in doing that, they've kind of got this stigma that they're the best at a low price. Well, as they got more and more and more aggressive in the fishing rod world, that stigma has kind of hung with them. But the truth is, they got the greatest fishing rods in the world. They absolutely have the best fishing rods in the world, and they can build anything. But their goal has been to keep that price point affordable. So they have tried to make the world's greatest fishing rods within a guy's budget that will allow him to afford them. So in the mind of a lot of anglers, there's other brands that are better because they cost more, but that's not true. So my goal is to meet up with Zona and Van Dam and Montgomery and Hackney and let them explain their rod, what it does, why they designed it, how it outperforms other rods, and let people really get a peek under the cover at what went in place to build all these rods and make them the best rods in the world for a lot lesser price than a lot of the competition.
Wow.
So we got to clear the mind up of the consumer who thinks because a product costs more, it's better.
That is so true. I mean, I'm an esthetician, so, you know, I work with makeup and all that. Come to find out, a lot of these big companies own some of these higher brand companies, like, for instance, Revlon.
Yeah, don't say names. Okay,
we'll cut that out. We'll cut that out. Anyways, some of these bigger companies own some of the higher end companies, and they'll release the same product. So it'll be the same formula, just one has more of a higher end looking packaging than the other one does, but it's the exact same, like lip gloss, the exact same thing. But one sells for 99 cents and the other one sells for $99.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? And I know that to be true in that makeup world. Do you think my foundation is good?
Yeah, I think it looks pretty good.
Did I go too much on my mascara?
No, I think you're doing okay.
All right. Well, I want to get that. You know, I spent hours this morning working on my foundation, getting it looking good. So, but anyway, we've had a good time together. It's been kind of a chopped up show. We've talked about a lot of things. I'm excited about this fishing rod project. I'll keep you informed on what we do. I get to hang out with some cool guys and get the behind the scenes story on how they develop their particular fishing rod. The one thing that I will tell you, we talked about Mentor, and I'm a stickler on fishing rods. There's a little crankbait that's a flat crankbait, and it's hard to cast. And I fish with a lot of people. And they struggle casting this bait. And they always think it's the problem with the reel. They're getting a backlash constantly, a professional overrun. And they get these backlash, and they think, golly, bum, man, I got a tune this reel. I got to get doesn't have anything to do with the reel. The rod that they have is too stiff. It's not giving them any spring to cast this little lure. So it's backing that line up, and that's causing the reel's not the problem. It's the rod. So they've selected the wrong rod to do the job. And so I've got rods that I'm a stickler about, and I can pick up that same bait, and I can throw it 65, 70 feet. And everybody looks at that and says, wow, how'd you do that? Well, I just have the right rod to match the lure. And so I can go to one of these high schools, and these kids will be out there, and I may throw it 120, 130 feet. And they're out there throwing it 40 feet and getting a backlash. And I say, here, try my rod. And they throw it, and the light comes on. They say, oh, my gosh. So it's my rod. All this time, I've been fighting this backlash and because I thought it was my reel. Doesn't have anything to do with it. I said, that's what I'm trying to tell you. The right rod will make all the difference. And I'm so proud of working with Luz, and I'm so proud of the opportunity to hook up with these guys. And this is a project I'm excited about.
That is exciting.
It's being a mentor.
There you go.
All these high school kids, man, I love them, and we got to get these guys on track.
Right.
Gotta help them do a little fundraising. We're doing that through Huckleberry Apparel. I'm excited about that.
That link will be in the description of every podcast video going from here on out. I believe we've had it in some previous podcast episodes as well. But just go check that out and go register.
Big part of my life, big part of my life. So we've had a fun day today. I hope you enjoyed it. Been a little chopped up, but we've covered a lot of ground, a lot of topics, answered your questions. Send us some more questions, and we'll try to do that again.
All right.
All right. Tell them bye, Sarah Beth.
All right. Bye. See you guys next week.
All right. Hey, go up there and hit that subscribe button for us, and we appreciate that. And thank you for watching, and we'll be back later. God bless you. I'm Hank Parker.
The house needs painting, grass needs mowing. Where's he at?
Hi, this is Hank. Sorry I missed your call. Leave me your name and your number, and I'll get back to you.
He's gone fishing.